Brittanee Drexel was 17, headstrong, and fully convinced she knew what she was doing. She told her mom she'd be staying with a friend nearby. In reality, she was headed to Myrtle Beach for spring break. It wasn't rebellion, it wasn't reckless. It was just a teenager trying to feel grown. What happened next wasn't a life lesson about boundaries. It was the kind of nightmare that plays out slowly, painfully, and over way too many years, because for over a decade, no one was telling the full story. Before we dive in, if you like your true crime brief and bingeable, you're in the right place. Hit follow now for at least 2 new episodes every week. This is 10-Minute Murder. Let's get into it. Spring break has always been a strange mix. Part beach parties and freedom, part bad decisions and worse outcomes. And sometimes, when everything goes sideways, it stops being fun and turns into something darker. For the Drexel family, spring break in 2009 marked the moment that everything fell apart. Their 17-year-old daughter, Britney, had asked if she could go to Myrtle Beach, South Carolina, with some friends. She wanted a taste of independence, that rush of almost adulthood, but that trip would end in a way that no one was ready for. Britney was magnetic, the kind of person others just naturally wanted to be around. She was full of life, always smiling, and happiest when she was with the people that she loved. Soccer, shopping, laughing with friends, those were her favorite things. She had big dreams, too. She wanted to be a nurse. She wanted a family. She also wanted to be a model while she figured the rest of it out. Britney had a striking look, especially her eyes. She was born with a condition that left her completely blind in her right eye. After several surgeries, the eye wandered at times. A lot of people might have felt self-conscious about it. Britney didn't. She chose bright blue contacts that made her eyes even more noticeable. What could have been seen as a flaw, she turned into something bold. She started wearing bright blue contact lenses to help stabilize it. Not the kind you grab off of a drugstore shelf. Hers were bold, dramatic, and unforgettable. The one detail gave her an edge. It set her apart, which is exactly what she wanted. But like most teenagers, Britney wanted to grow up a little faster than she should have. Back in the spring of 2009, Britney asked her mom, Dawn, for permission to go to Myrtle Beach, South Carolina with her friends. The Drexels were living in Rochester, New York, near Lake Ontario. And Myrtle Beach wasn't just far, it was a full-day drive, deep into party territory. Britney was only 17 years old. The thought of her daughter being that far away, surrounded by strangers and beach crowds and alcohol-fueled chaos, made Dawn uneasy. Actually, it made her stomach twist. She told Britney as much. She had a bad feeling, and she couldn't shake it. Britney didn't take the no very well. In true teenage fashion, the conversation blew up. Yelling, slam doors, silence. But eventually things cooled off. They weren't totally back to normal, but they were speaking again. A few days later, Britney told her mom she was feeling upset from the fight and asked if she could spend a couple of nights at a friend's house to cool off. Dawn agreed. The two of them kept in touch by phone over the next few days, and everything seemed fine. But Britney wasn't cooling off at a friend's house in Rochester. She had packed a bag and gone to South Carolina. The friend she said she was staying with lived hundreds of miles away. And Britney hadn't just left town, she'd crossed state lines, and she hadn't told anyone. Britney and her friends checked into the Bar Harbor Motel in Myrtle Beach, ready to jump into spring break. She called her mom and said she'd spent the day at the beach. Nothing about it raised any alarms. The weather back in Rochester had been unusually warm, too, and people were out by the lake. Dawn assumed her daughter was somewhere close to home, at that beach. Around 8 p.m. that night, Britney left the hotel alone and headed toward the Blue Water Resort, just a few blocks away. While she walked, she texted back and forth with her boyfriend, John Greco. It was a normal, casual conversation until she suddenly stopped replying. John noticed the silence right away. He called her. No answer. He tried again. Still nothing. So he started trying to call her friends. When none of them knew where she was, John made the call that no one ever wants to make. He called Dawn. That's when everything unraveled. Dawn obviously had no idea that Britney was in South Carolina. She thought her daughter was still in Rochester, cooling off at a friend's house. Now she knew the truth. Britney had lied to go to Myrtle Beach anyway. Dawn called the police immediately. By the next morning, the search had begun. Police pulled security footage that showed Britney leaving the Blue Water Resort. They also identified the last person known to have seen her, a 20-year-old named Peter Brazowitz. Peter and Britney had known each other for years, but he hadn't come to Myrtle Beach with her. He admitted he saw her the night that she went missing, but claimed he had no idea where she went after leaving the resort. Dawn didn't buy it. She traveled to Myrtle Beach herself to help search and told her sister in an email that Peter showed no concern, no empathy, nothing that resembled someone worried about a missing friend. Quote, "My daughter made mistakes, and one of the largest ones she ever made was when she trusted this group of people with her life." Peter and the people he was with that night were all named persons of interest. The search pushed on. Back at the motel, investigators found Britney's clothes in her room, but her purse and phone were missing, suggesting that she hadn't planned on being gone for very long. Her phone pinged about 50 miles south of Myrtle Beach before the signal cut out in the early morning hours. Whatever happened to Britney, she hadn't gone there on her own. As the search dragged on, Dawn Drexel went public with her suspicions. She believed Peter, or someone connected to him, had lured Britney to Myrtle Beach with the intention of trafficking her. Peter, of course, denied all of that. Not long after, photos surfaced showing him and friends partying miles away from the area where Britney's phone had last pinged that night. Eventually, police cleared him. They announced that Peter was no longer a person of interest. Their working theory shifted. They now believed Britney had likely been abducted and killed shortly after she disappeared. They offered a $25,000 reward for any tip that could bring Britney home. And one man claimed he knew what happened. His name was Taquan Brown. He was already serving 25 years for manslaughter in a South Carolina prison. Taquan said he saw Britney not long after she went missing, but what he described was nothing short of horrific. According to him, he had been making a delivery to what he called a stash house. While he was there, he said he saw a man, already known to law enforcement, sexually assaulting Britney. Taquan claimed that Britney tried to escape, but was pistol whipped and dragged back inside. Then he heard 2 gunshots and believed she had been killed. It was a disturbing tip, and it sent investigators down a new path, but it led nowhere. Every lead dried up. Every possible suspect hit a wall. Then, in 2022, 13 years after Britney disappeared, something finally broke open. A man named Raymond Moody walked into a police station and confessed. He was 62 years old at the time and already on the sex offender registry. Back in 2012, he had been listed as a person of interest in Britney's case, but the evidence just wasn't there. Nothing stuck, so the case stalled again. But now, a decade later, Raymond decided that he couldn't hold it in anymore. Raymond Moody told investigators that during the spring break of 2009, he and his girlfriend Angel were cruising the streets of Myrtle Beach. His exact words were, "We were hunting," and the person they found was Brittanee Drexel. According to Raymond, they pulled up next to her, pretending to be lost. Once she got close enough, he grabbed her, forced her into the back seat, and held her down while Angel drove them to a remote spot. They had already set up a tent there. Raymond said he told Britney not to worry, that he did this kind of thing often, that he kidnapped girls, then ransomed them for $5,000 from the City Chamber of Commerce, and none of that was actually true. Instead, he took her to his tent and raped her. Angel, according to him, stood by and watched. Afterward, he used a yellow nylon rope to strangle Britney, then stabbed her in the chest with an ice pick. He buried her body himself. When he finally confessed 13 years later, he led investigators to that exact spot. Her remains were recovered. Raymond was charged with murder, kidnapping, and first-degree criminal sexual misconduct. He pleaded guilty to everything. The court sentenced him to life in prison, along with 2 additional 30-year terms to be served one after the other. Angel was charged with lying to the FBI about her role in Britney's abduction, assault, and murder. She also pleaded guilty. In February of 2025, she was sentenced to 18 years in federal prison. You know, when I read about Britney, I keep thinking about how easy it is to see parts of ourselves in her. She was 17, strong-willed, full of dreams and bigger plans. She was navigating the space between being a teenager and adult, just like so many of us did, or so many of our kids are doing right now. Aside from break her parents' rules, she didn't really do anything wrong. She just trusted the wrong people. Her story isn't about bad choices. It's about predators and how far some people will go to take advantage of vulnerability. Dawn Drexel never gave up, not once. And after 13 long years, she got her answer. But it should have never taken that long. And it should have never happened at all. Britney deserved a full life. And the fact that someone took that away from her doesn't get to define who she was. What defines her is how many people never stopped fighting to bring her home. Thanks for listening to this episode of 10 Minute Murder. I'm Joe, I'm the host, and if you're a new listener, hit subscribe wherever you're listening right now. Follow along on social media. If you've got Facebook, Instagram, I don't do the Twitter, but I've got Threads and I've got TikTok and Blue Sky and something else I'm sure I'm forgetting about. But the links are in the show notes of this episode, or you can go to 10minutemurder.com and find it all there. And as more and more new listeners join the podcast and become subscribers, I don't think a lot of you know where these stories come from. I don't just invent these out of thin air. Obviously, they're true crime stories, so they're actual real stories. I hope you realize that. But I don't decide necessarily what stories I talk about. Those come from you listening to me right now. You have been submitting over the years these stories. I'd like for you to talk about this story. I'd like for you to talk about this story. And then from there, I go and I find as much information as I can on these stories, try to determine if they would make a good 10-minute murder episode. And if they do, then I do more work on it. But ultimately, it's you that decides what I'm talking about. And something just occurred to me. I wish I had a better system for thanking you for submitting these episodes. Like after I do them, this case in particular, for example, 2 or 3 of you suggested that I cover this Brittanee Drexel case. And I really suck at having a system of, once I cover the case that you've suggested, getting back to you and saying thank you. I usually try to thank you in the moment if I have time, but I don't always have time to do that. There are thousands of messages and emails and things like that. You get it. But here's what I can do. After I post this to social media, in the comments, please just hop in there and say, this was a suggestion of mine. That way I can say thank you publicly, because I never remember to keep up with the people's names who suggest cases. Sometimes it's just too many people suggesting the same case. It would just be me reading a list of names, and I'd rather not do that. In the comments on social media, when I post about this story, be sure to hop in there and say, this was a suggestion of mine, so that I can say thank you for that. If you want to, you don't have to. And all right, that's going to do it. That is your episode for today. If you want more information on the podcast, want to reach out to me, 10minutemurder.com is the website. Thanks for listening.